am out in Eureka, California, and I work with Move to Amend. I serve on the executive committee, and field organizing coordination is my main role. And I am going to be doing the presentation today. This will be recorded, and so it'll be available afterwards for folks who missed, or if you want to catch it again. And I do have the lovely and talented Shannon James and Brittany Schultz over here helping me as excellent greeters. And they'll also be fielding the questions when we get going. So for those of you who haven't done a webinar before, just going to go over some quick details to hopefully make experience work well for you. So I think it's actually on your right. You can see the list of the folks who are here to get a sense of who else has joined us. And then on the bottom, well, actually, with your little icons, you can actually give us feedback if we're going too fast or too slow. You can let us know, and Shannon and Brittany will catch my attention and give me that feedback. Happy to see that everyone's fine at the moment. You can maximize your screen if you like to see the presentation the best. It's on kind of the top right. If you do maximize your screen, you won't be able to see the chat or the questions down below, but we will also flash the questions up on the screen as they come. So if you want to maximize your screen, you won't at least miss the questions that way. And we're going to turn off the chat here and just turn on the Q&A mode. And sometimes I know that we ask folks to hold their questions till the end. We're going to try letting you interrupt with questions, but please keep them on topic, and then we'll have time at the end for questions as well. So if you have a question about anything I'm saying, you can go ahead and type it directly, and then Shannon will help me know that it's there. And if it is off topic, or if we are going to get to it later, she might hold on to it. So if your question doesn't get addressed, don't feel like you need to type it over again. We'll get to it. And if you're having any technical difficulties, you can contact the support folks who run this service directly, and normally they're pretty responsive. And I do apologize for the ads on the side. If you don't have your ad blocker on, then you might be seeing those. And those are unrelated to Move to Amend, but this is a free service, so just do your best to ignore them. That's what we're doing on this end. So what we're going to cover today is just a really quick review, because there are some new folks here, about how to get started with a Move to Amend group, just very briefly. And then finances, the kinds of things that you need to know to begin collecting money, like opening a bank account, keeping records, and also some details about nonprofit organizations, because it's a question that comes up a lot. And then we'll talk a little bit about just some general fundraising principles. We're not going to go into a ton of ideas, but I have some additional resources I can point you to. And also, if folks have ideas for fundraising events or things like that have worked well for you at the Q&A, we can share those with others. And then we'll let you know what's coming up next. So that's the agenda, and it should take us about an hour to do this training. So just in the quick review front, in terms of getting started, there's a page on the Move to Amend website. The link is right there. It's not going to be a live link, but you can go to it later, and that will give you some details on how to get started. But it's really easy to start a Move to Amend group. You can actually just start with a group of your friends, and then we can help connect you to others in your area who have signed the Move to Amend petition and who are interested in this issue. So the best thing to do is to actually hold a meeting that you can hold in your living room or at a church or in your local library meeting room, and put the call out, and then we'll help publicize that event to the other petition signers in your area. And on the site, there's some ideas for kind of what to do at that first meeting. And then at that meeting, you can plan kind of where you're going to get started with your Move to Amend group. And some suggestions we have is you could bring a Move to Amend speaker to your community. there's not too terribly many of us at the moment who have the capacity to travel around the country. So if we can't get to you quickly, we can also do a virtual presentation for you, and you can contact us about details for that. You could also host a study group and invite others from the public to join you, and you can start collecting signatures for Move to Amend and get more people engaged. So there's other ideas on the website, but those are just some quick and easy ideas. And then from there, we ask folks to officially affiliate with Move to Amend. And come on board as an actual Move to Amend organization. And our goals for our affiliates are that you have a emphasis and focus your attention on coalition building and movement building, that you use the Move to Amend name, that you grow all of our numbers through collecting signatures of folks in your community who want to get involved, that you have a democratic internal process and a commitment to anti-oppression. And we have some details about why that's important in an article on our website that's linked right there. And then the way that it works is once affiliates have a critical mass of geographic representation in their state, that basically there's enough affiliates in their state that the majority of the population is represented through various affiliates, we will have a process for folks to form state chapters. And there are a few states that are starting to move in that direction. And then those state chapters will have a seat on our steering committee for the national organization. So that's it in a nutshell. If you want to know more about all of this, you can check out the Move to Amend website, and there's all sorts of details there. And then also you can give us a call, and you can check out the past webinars where we actually go into all this in a lot of detail. But in the interest of those of us who are here, because we have participated in a bunch of the webinars, we'll move on to the topic at hand. And again, if you still have questions, there's actually a survey at the end. You can let us know what they are, and we'll be in touch with you. And there's contact info at the end as well for us to be able to follow up and get those specific questions about how you can get more involved. Answered. So, in terms of the topic today, we're going to talk about finances and fundraising. We're going to talk about finances first. And once you form a group and you want to get started doing stuff, normally groups get started by kind of in terms of the fundraising department, passing the hat at your meetings, and you've probably done some of this, or maybe you have a few folks who are willing to out of pocket pay for copies or buying Move to Amend materials so that you can have them at your tables and things like that. But if you start to do enough of that, you're going to move towards probably wanting to start your own bank account so that folks, so that you can keep track of your records and so that you can separate it out from any individual's personal bank keeping. So opening a bank account is totally doable for a non-incorporated organization. Lots of times folks think that you need to be a corporation or you need to have some sort of formal process that you've gone through with the government before you can open a bank account. And there's only one small step that you need to do with the government. The rest of it's pretty easy. So basically, the things that a bank is going to ask for you to open up your own bank account for an organization, which is what a Move to Amend group would be. In this instance is a minimum balance. So sometimes the bank has that minimum balance set, but you're going to need some amount of money to deposit into the bank. You're going to need a copy of minutes from meeting of your organization that clearly includes the organization and who is being authorized to open up this bank account. And you're probably going to need a list of officers or anybody else who's going to be a co-signer on the account. So it's best to write these up in a way that makes them, look formal so that the bank isn't suspicious of you, but basically all you need to do is at a meeting approve opening a bank account, delegate who will do it, and then write up that in an official way for the bank so that they're clear that the person who's there has authority to do so. And then those people who are going to be signers on the account will need some form of ID, and generally a driver's license works fine. A Social Security number can work as well. And then lastly, you're going to need a tax ID number or an employer identification number. And for short, it's called a TID or an EID, or sometimes an EIN number. And lots of times folks don't know what that is. So the way to get a tax ID number is actually pretty simple. It's not hard. You have to contact the IRS, and you're looking for Form SS-4, which is called Application for Employer Identification Number. You can call the IRS to have a form mailed to you, or you can actually apply for an EIN directly online. The website is here, but if you just also type in EIN application IRS, it'll come up. And this, like I said, will be recorded, so if you want to take the direct link later, you can do that. You do not have to be incorporated to get a tax ID number. So there's actually no official process. other than filling out this form that you need to do to get an EIN number. And basically, you're kind of understood to be an unincorporated organization. And on the application, what you'll check is that you're a nonprofit organization. And we're going to talk a minute because nonprofit organization can mean different things in different contexts. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So just hold that thought. So a couple things about having an EIN number. Once you get it, you are going to be responsible, whoever applied for it and the organization, for all the legal and illegal uses that might come from that number. So it's important to just follow some basic guidelines so that you can make sure that you don't get yourself into hot water. So don't loan out your EIN number to others to use because you don't necessarily know where that's going to go. It's really easy to get an EIN number, so other groups aren't really going to need yours. You can just go ahead and use it yourself. It's important that you maintain accurate records in a paper trail. So this doesn't have to be some super complicated bookkeeping system, but you want to have notes from your meetings where official business happens, especially if you're talking about money. And if you have officers, any changes that you make, you want to just kind of keep a paper trail of that. And then most importantly is you want to have a paper trail of your receipts. And so fundraising and expenses. And it's actually, you can just keep all of that in a shoebox, especially if we're not talking about a lot of money or in a binder. It's not, again, critical, especially for a small grassroots group in the initial stages, that it be a real elaborate tracking system. It's just a paper trail that you want to have so that in case down the road anything comes up, you can clearly show that where the money went and how it came in. If you do change your address that you fill in on the EIN number, like say the person who's responsible, you use your personal address of the leader of your group, and somebody else takes the reins and you're using a different address, you want to change that and you have to notify the IRS. Or if you set up a PO box, you want to, or down the road someday you have an office, all of those things would require a change of address form, which is a really simple form that you fill out. And then also, if the group ever closes, you need to officially cancel your EIN number to the IRS when you close the bank account. So all of those things are pretty straightforward. They're important to do. But none of them require a law degree or accounting certificates. Any person can do them. You just want to make sure you have your ducks in a row. In terms of the question of nonprofit organizations, is there a question? question that I should go back to? Well, let's do that one at the end. I see that there are some questions, and at least one of them looks like, both of them look like we'll get to them later based on what they're about, so we won't forget you. So in terms of what I said about nonprofit organizations, so for the purposes of getting your tax ID number or your EIN, and I said you're going to check off that you're a nonprofit organization on that application. For those purposes, a nonprofit organization means that your major purpose or your activities are not making money in general. This is not the same thing as being a federally recognized nonprofit organization or a 501c3 organization. Sometimes people use those terms interchangeably. They're actually not interchangeable, but for these purposes, all we're talking about is just that your primary purpose is not making a profit, and so therefore you're a nonprofit organization. To be a federally recognized nonprofit organization, you actually have to apply to the IRS and to your state oftentimes. For that. So just a little bit more explanation on this front. Just because you're a nonprofit organization doesn't mean that you can't have a profit, i.e. that the money you bring in is more than the money you spend, and so you have some money in your bank account. That does not make you not a nonprofit if you have money in your bank account. But what it means is that you can't use that excess money to individually benefit your officers or directors or members or any individuals. You may reimburse your members for expenses that you incur while conducting move to amend business. So sometimes people think that they can't actually reimburse themselves for out-of-pocket expenses like copies or postage or travel to a meeting or whatever. Kinds of things that you determine are move to amend business, and it's probably good to spell those out ahead of time so that you have clarity. You don't want, as leader of the group, to just be reimbursing yourself and not having that be transparent. But it's totally legal to use your excess income on expenses, even if they're reimbursement expenses. So if you have questions, let's see. Actually, another thing is that in some states, being this kind of nonprofit organization in those kind of general loose terminology can still trigger you needing to make additional filings, and that's normally around how much money you're actually raising and spending. So our suggestion is that it might be a good idea if you're actually raising, thousands of dollars to at some point check in. with a legal or tax professional that's actually in your state to determine if you should officially file yourself a little bit more. And that still doesn't mean that you need to go to the IRS and get federal nonprofit status, but you may need to become an official organization for your state. And every state is different on that. Department. So again, it's really triggered by the amount of money, and that varies from state to state. So if you're nervous at all, it's actually oftentimes a quick conversation with a tax professional to just know a little bit about what the requirements are in your state. You could also do some Googling, but if there's anybody in your group who also might have a friend that they could just ask, that's a good idea as well. And the kinds of rules that would apply to you are going to be for, like, if you describe yourself as like a nonprofit, like hobby organization, for example, to these professionals, that'll give them a better sense of kind of what category of organization you're talking about. So, and then lastly, nonprofit doesn't necessarily mean tax exempt. Lots of times people put those things together, nonprofit, tax exempt organization, and people think of them as synonymous. But being exempt from taxes actually is a whole process to the IRS, and you have to get approval from the IRS. And then also state tax agencies to be considered tax exempt. So in this instance, we're not talking about that. And then I'm going to go into a little bit of info about taxes as well. So we're nonprofit. Move to My groups are nonprofit in our financial behavior, but not automatically tax exempt. Kind of depends on what you're doing. Tax exemption status is expensive and it can be complicated. That means that you have ongoing responsibilities and legal obligations, and it also can limit your activities in terms of lobbying and electioneering. And as Move to Amend grows in our movement, we're going to have to come up against some of this in terms of lobbying and electioneering. And at the executive committee, national level, we are currently seeking our own 501c3 and 501c4 status. I'm not going to get into what those terms mean, but for those of you who know, I figured you might have some questions about this, so just to head that off and let you know that we're seeking our own 501c3 and C4 status. Currently, we are a project of Liberty Tree, which is one of our coalition members that is a 501c3. And at this point, our activities their 501c3 activities, but we actually foresee in the future, as we're getting to, larger and potentially engaging in more lobbying of elected officials, that our 501c4 status is going to be necessary. As well. So we'll keep you informed about what this means for you. One thing that I didn't kind of put in writing here, but if you are an affiliate, particularly if you're going to be doing a fair amount of activity and you think that you are going to be needing to have some contributions that come in from donors who want tax exemption, we can have a conversation with you about potentially Liberty Tree umbrellaing your organization the same way. That it umbrellas national move to amend to allow for that to happen. There's some requirements that Liberty Tree has to make sure that they meet their obligations, and it's going to mean an extra layer of accounting. But it is a possibility in this interim between when we have our own 501c3 status and now, that if you need to collect a larger donation from somebody who therefore needs it to be a tax-exempt donation, that there are ways that we can work with you to make that happen. So I see that there's a question, so why don't you go ahead and display it. is $5,000 from your group formed or at one time? Suzanne, actually 5,000 is sort of just a general rule of thumb. It's not a set thing. If you, and I actually kind of struggled with what amount to suggest. You could actually pick a lower number, and that wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea, and it could potentially be a higher number. This is what really varies from state to state. So our suggestion is kind of, if you're looking towards getting there, before you get there, to just have that conversation with a tax professional just to make sure that you're meeting your tax requirements to your state and your accounting requirements. It's not a hard and fast rule. It was just a safe bet suggestion that I came up with. And hide it to there. So the last thing on taxes is that having said all of that about that you don't want to go for tax exemption and etc., that does mean that potentially you might need to pay some sales tax potentially, and even if you were a nonprofit, this could come up. So a nonprofit tax exempt organization. Sorry, this is kind of confusing. So I just wanted to give people a heads up about this. This isn't to alarm you. Basically, sales of literature or other items could trigger you to need to pay sales tax. So the way that you can help ensure that this doesn't come up for you, and it has to do with amounts and also how you're selling and what you're selling. So lots of times the only place where this is relevant is if people are selling materials at a table, and they've got bumper stickers out. We will have T-shirts, and so say they've got you've got Move to Amend T-shirts, and people want them, and so you're selling them. Well, the way that you can kind of ensure that you're not going to trigger a need to worry about sales tax is that you can give away your materials or accept voluntary donations to avoid triggering the requirement. So in terms of something that you're not going to just say, sure, just take them, like a T-shirt, something that's a little bit more valuable, you can kind of word the way that's framed around that people are making a donation to you, and that in return for the donation, their gift is that they get a T-shirt. So again, this really isn't something that you need to be too terribly concerned about. If you're in doubt, one thing that you can do is ask other groups how they do it in your community to get a sense of what the requirements are for your state, because every state is a little bit different in this department. But to be on the safe side, really frame what you're doing around voluntary donations or that you're giving away materials, and that'll help ensure that you're all right. So, yeah, go ahead and put that one up. Jane is asking, what is the advantage of being nonprofit? So again, nonprofit meaning different things, but I'm going to take this question to mean nonprofit tax exempt, which is normally what people mean when they're talking about it. So the advantage would be that you can accept donations from donors who can then write that donation off as a tax exemption. So it means that larger donations, lots of times people are giving those looking specifically for that tax exemption. And also foundation contributions generally almost always need to come to a tax exempt organization. So that's kind of the idea with that. And then additionally, as a tax exempt nonprofit, this whole business of paying taxes is something that you don't have to do, and so you don't have to worry about it. Our assumption right now is that all of our Move to Amend organizations are small enough, and what you're doing is not paying for staff, for example, and so the idea of paying taxes is not relevant yet. But as we grow and we have our own 501c3 status, and we kind of determine what the legal and tax structure of Move to Amend will be, then there may be some changes in that department. But for the moment, lots of times people think if they're raising money that they need to have tax exempt status, and that's just really, really not the case. Almost all of the people who contribute money to even charities larger than Move to Amend, or more often than you, really actually don't qualify to receive that tax exemption. The small donations, it's only the larger donors who are really able to get a tax exemption. It's kind of a way that richer people benefit from the system. But it does translate into something that we want to be aware of in terms of what our options are. Go ahead. Okay, why do you need to get a tax-exempt EIN? Well, the answer is you need to get an EIN, period, in order to open a bank account. There's one other exception that I'm going to show you of another way to do it in just a second. But if you want to open a bank account as your organization, you need an EIN number, and it's going to ask what kind of organization you are on the application to get an EIN number. And the answer is that you are a nonprofit organization, not a tax-exempt organization, but a nonprofit organization. Hopefully that clarifies. And if anyone's working through these details and needs help from us, we can totally help you as you're filling out the application if any of it doesn't make sense. So the one alternative to getting an EIN number that you could use is that you may have a member of your group go ahead and open a bank account in their own name using their social security number, and then actually you can open up like a checking account as long as it's non-interest bearing, because that person doesn't want to be making money and then they'll have a whole tax issue, and then also a potentially even bigger question later, but as long as it's a non-interest bearing account, I can use a personal social security number, and then on the account you can basically use what's called doing business as, and then you, for example, could have your move to amend group's name on the account. So your checkbook would basically have that individual's name, and then it would say doing business as, and then your group. And so you can still have an official checking account that way. The issue with this, though, is that it could have tax implications for the treasurer. And again, this depends on how much money is raised and spent. But because it's in their personal name, the will treat that as income for them, because they're not, they're making the assumption that this is their personal account or a personal account of theirs, and officially it is. So my suggestion would actually be to go the route of getting an EIN number and setting yourself up more formally in that way. As I said, it's not, it shouldn't be a burden. We can help you through any of it, and it's relatively simple and straightforward, and it kind of means that you don't have to double back later if you were to raise more money, say if you were doing like a larger campaign, or a few years down the road, realize that actually you need to double back and do it the other way, because you've now raised enough money to trigger this issue. But this is an option that you could look into. You just need to be aware that the person who's opening that account needs to really be clear about what the implications are for them. So again, that is something you would want to make sure to talk to somebody in your state who knows what the rules are about what the tax implications would be for that individual. So that's kind of like the overview of the sorts of things that you need to know to open a bank account. And once you do, the kinds of stuff you have to track. As I said, if you have particular questions or are stuck in particular places with any of that, we'd be happy to help you out. So I'm going to turn now to just fundraising, and this grassroots fundraising journal is where I got these 3 points, but they definitely follow the way that I think about fundraising, and I just want to put a plug in here for Grassroots Fundraising Journal. These folks are really great, and if you want more details on fundraising specifically for grassroots groups, so the idea is that it's groups who are, one, going to number of individuals for support, not just like a foundation or one wealthy individual, and then also that your fundraising is matching your organizing, and that the idea is that you have a goal of organizing and then you need to do fundraising to support that real goal of organizing. And not all fundraising resources have that understanding, but the folks at Grassroots Fundraising are really good in that realm. And then likewise, the ideas and strategies and support that they offer meets those principles and is therefore more helpful to a group like Move to Amend. So they have a journal that they publish regularly, and they have a website with a lot of extensive information on it. So I encourage you to look there. And there's some good ideas, case studies of ways to raise money, creative ideas that can tie organizing and movement building with fundraising. But in general, their principles are that people give money when they're asked, and they don't give money if they're not asked. So that's really important to remember, and to kind of build into what you're doing when you're doing outreach to people, to remember that if you don't ask them for money, they're probably not going to give it to you. So you need to build in ways that you're asking, and train yourself and your other volunteers who you're working with to get into that culture. in your group that you're asking. And that's true for giving time as well, and volunteering any resources. And even when people are asked, they don't always give. So you need to ask for more donations than you need to actually bring in, and you also need to be comfortable with people telling you no. And there's lots of reasons why people might tell you no, and a lot of them could have nothing to do with how much they support the organization. And they might mean no because they could give you money later, or they might mean no because they could give you money never, or they might mean no because you didn't ask them for the right amount, or in the right. Way. Also, donors aren't ATMs, so you need to thank them and keep them posted on what you're doing and with their money. If they want them to give you more. And this is a little bit more in terms of a principle of an actual organization, but Move to Amend is going to be a movement for the long haul and an organization for the long haul. So I encourage you to not be intimidated about this group that you know that could easily give you $50. So why ask them for $20 if they could give you $50 and you think that they will give you $50? So be strategic about what the ask is, and also be strategic about what your second ask will be, because maybe the answer was no based on the fact that it was no because you didn't ask the right way or the right amount, but if you ask for a different amount, follow-up, somebody could do that. And then remember to thank them if they do donate, and make sure that they know that the donation isn't tax deductible. Like I said, most people don't actually even utilize this element of their tax return, but for some people, you have no idea necessarily of how they do their taxes, so just make sure that it's clear that while Movement is a nonprofit, we're not tax exempt, and so their donation is not tax exempt. Here's some other tips on the fundraising, and then I'm almost done. You want to recruit others for your fundraising team. The more people, the more potential contacted donors. So, really ask everyone in your group to participate with this. You can draft up a sample letter and a form that they could fill out to signify, along with their check. And it's good to make it personal, though. So if you have the sample letter that you kind of draft up for everyone to use, encourage people to personalize it and make it specific to the person as much as possible. Make sure that the wording that you're using and kind of what you're saying you're going to use it for, and what move to amend is, or what your group is doing is consistent. So make sure everyone's on the same page. And then you can send those letters and make follow-up phone calls. So obviously sending letters does incur some expenses. So, even more, less costly would be to just ask people directly without a letter. Or sometimes you can ask people directly, and if they're not sure, you could leave them the letter to think about it, and then follow up with a phone call. But in general, the most important thing is to ask, and then the details about how you do it, obviously a little bit more of an art than a science, but most important is to ask. And lots of times people will kind of come up with all sorts of elaborate ways to to avoid actually asking, and instead to have the materials around asking. And so I encourage you to just go ahead and do it. The other thing is that, you have this list of people that you know to ask, but also, when you're tabling and when you're out there, and if somebody seems excited, ask them for a donation. Lots of times we ask them to do other stuff, but, don't ask for a donation. And most people are really busy, and if they're excited, a donation is actually the easiest thing that they could do. And, for example, asking them to come to a meeting and get involved is actually a higher level of commitment than just writing a quick check initially. So don't forget that you could ask strangers for money as well. And then there's some other ideas there, but they do require more resources and more training than just a simple, brainstorming who you know and who you want to ask. So basically, just in summary, it's important to make goals and plans, and then once you set those, work backwards to determine what's realistic. But everyone will feel more confident if they have goals and a sense of how they're going to go about doing fundraising. And also, goals can help make sure that you get enough money as opposed to, the minimum. Because if everybody's goal is to raise $200, say, that's a lot more clear than everybody's goal is to raise money. So try to make those goals specific, and then be specific about how you're going to get it. And then keep accurate records, both to cover your butt and also to analyze your results to see how you're doing and where you could be improving, or also who to ask for more money of later, because most people are actually willing to give more often than you think. It has to do with the fact that they aren't asked more often. Make it personal. People give to people, so as much as possible, if there's already a relationship, that's the best way to ensure that there's a donation at the end of the ask. And involve everyone and make it fun, and also don't forget to thank people. That's basically it in a nutshell. And then there are two resources that I found that were particularly helpful around grassroots fundraising rather than fundraising for organizations. And again, both fundraising to the grassroots and by the grassroots themselves, as in us. So these are the two spots that I would suggest. So at this point, I see that there's some questions. Let's definitely get to them. And if you have any questions about any of this, please let me know, and we'll see what I can do with the last, 15 minutes here, we'll say. So go ahead and throw it up there. Okay. Michael Grayman, if the local affiliate is operating as a committee of a national nonprofit like a church, and the donation is made to the church, memo to Move to Amend Group, it can be tax deductible. If the affiliate has a separate sub-account. This is true, and that's sort of along the lines of what I meant when I said that Liberty Tree, which is Move to Amend's fiscal sponsor currently. So basically, this is how Move to Amend actually operates, using Liberty Tree's 501c3 tax deductible status. So yes, particular affiliates, if that is all worked out ahead of time, could potentially also use Liberty Tree, or potentially an organization in your community, or if you're connected with something else, that's an option. If you're going to go that route, if you could let us know, because we are applying for our own 501c3 status, and obviously if using the Move to Amend name, but then raising money, and then even more importantly spending money on certain things, that still ties back to us. So we want to just sort of be aware, and so that we're making sure that our own requirements are being met as well. And it'll be a little bit easier when we have our own 501c3 status, but honestly, the level of accounting is quite high if you're going to umbrella other groups, and so it may still make sense for people to have their own accounts and kind of their own, all chapter organizations basically do it differently, and there's a number of chapter organizations within Move to Amend already, and so we're kind of drawing on the experience that folks, for example, at the Alliance for Democracy or the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom have had around their chapters to help inform what we should do. And then, okay, so Michael has a number of people interested in putting on the Judge Waite play, which is a play that some members of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom wrote about 1886 and corporate personhood. So how and when can we get the script/slides? My understanding is that that is available now through Wilt, but I have on my list to put it on the Move to Amend website, and I also will commit to, as soon as I do that, sending it out to the affiliate listserv that I know that you're on, Michael, and there's others on this call who are on to see, and then folks can have it, and we'll put it on the Move to Amend website as well. I'll try to do that this week so that there's not a delay. And there, just so folks know, there is another short play that's not quite, it's more like street theater, but it could be adapted, that is also on the Move to Amend website that we wrote for our 4th of July kind of street festival about corporate personhood as well. So putting on a play is a good idea for a fundraising event, for sure. What about becoming a Move to Amend speaker for regional presentations? I'd be interested and willing. All right, Bud, we will take a note of that and follow up with you. At this point, we would want to, obviously make sure to bring you closer into the loop to make that work, but definitely we do need more Move to Amend speakers, and there are a number of folks who are not kind of on the national team who have been doing presentations in their states. For example, Carla in Florida, who's on this call. So it's definitely doable. Thanks for that offer. We'll follow up with you after the webinar, and if you could make sure to fill out the survey at the end and indicate that as well. That's because right now this email address isn't something that we can copy and paste. So that's the best way for us to have what we need to follow up with you there. Okay, are there any other questions or comments that folks have? If folks have ideas for fundraising events that you are going to be trying or have done, feel free to chime in with those as well. I know that the folks in Wisconsin, for example, put on a wedding between a corporation and a person at a bar, and That was actually a fundraiser for them and obviously an educational event. And there's some info about that again in the June webinar. And they have a script for that as well that we'd be happy to provide. If folks would like that, just let us know. All right, it looks like there aren't any more questions, so hopefully this means we covered everything you were hoping for. If you do feel as though there was specific stuff that you still need, then feel free to use the survey function that will pop up on your screen as soon as this ends, that we'd be happy to follow up with you. Go ahead and stick that one up there too. When I show movies, I put a sign in the basket saying $5 to $10 donation requested, no one turned away for lack of funds. Yeah, that's a great idea. And also, you know, having a donation jar on your table, and not just donations, but maybe a little bit of context for it, you know, about that you're raising money and why, or an idea for how the money might be used, or just a stronger ask than donations. Because again, people don't give unless they're asked, and there are a number of ways to ask people. Obviously, verbally can be the most effective, but making sure to have a culture of that we need resources to be able to do this work is important. Okay, so why don't you, so please complete the survey at the end of the webinar so that we can know what follow-up you might need or what your interests are going forward. If you have ideas for other webinar topics that you'd like to see, we have kind of a pool of them, but we are always adding, so feel free to include those. And next month, our webinar will be on October 4th, so we're going to go back to the first Tuesday. Thanks to everyone for being able to be flexible about this month. And the topic is going to be using elections as a platform for Move to Amend. And we'll cover ways to use local and state elections as a way to get Move to Amend in front of voters, the media, and candidates who are running for office in your community. There are a number of states that have November elections coming up this year. And then even if you don't have November elections, there's spring elections, and then next year is a presidential election year. So definitely we all want to be prepared for that, and it's good for us to start thinking about how we're going to use those opportunities. So with that, I am finished, and we're going to go ahead and end the session, which will take you to a screen with the survey. Thanks so much for being here, and if you have any questions, feel free to be in touch going forward. Thanks so much.